Make sure it's working. Okay.
Looks good to me.
Yep. And all of them in the waiting room for the final minute.
Just one more minute, people.
Yeah.
They can
Sorry.
wait.
They're a little eager.
I think it would be okay if we open or start admitting from the waiting room at this point. It'll take a couple minutes for more people to get on anyway.
My class is just like.
Oh, hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited to see a lot of you have joined today. Welcome to the Careers in Legal Industry Boston College Lawyer Alumni panel. Today we have some great panelists here to talk to you. If everyone could please mute yourself, that would be great. And yes, like I was saying, today we have some great panelists. We're still waiting on one more to join, but right now we have Caitlin Viggers and Blair E. Christian on with us today. I'll introduce them here in just a minute while we wait for the rest of the group to join. There's Kathleen. Okay. Hi, welcome, Kathleen. I see you've come on. Great. Okay. So as people kind of join the Zoom, I'll just kind of get started here with introducing our panelists. We were expecting John Mulcahy. He was unable to make it kind of last minute. So if you had an interest in connecting with him specifically or hearing from him, you know, we're hoping to keep him in mind for future events because he really wanted to be here. But we do have, thankfully tonight, Kathleen O'Neill Taylor, who works as an assistant general counsel at the FBI, where she defends the FBI employment discrimination cases and earned her bachelor's degree in psychology from BC in 1989. Welcome. Blair Christian is the class of 2015. She is an associate at Mayor Brown's New York office. And graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication. Welcome, Blair. And Caitlin Viggers is a graduate of BC Law from 2017 and also a Boston College graduate from 2008, so double eagle. She also majored in communications and currently works in the town attorney's office in New York. So welcome all. I think today we'll start with just your own introductions as well. I know I gave a little bit of information, and then I will ask some questions that I've prepared, and then we'll leave the rest of the time open for student questions. So like I said, if you could briefly all walk us through your journey in a minute or two and how you've kind of gotten to where you are today to kick us off, that would be really great.
Who would you like me to start first, Jessica? This is Kathleen.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Kathleen O'Neill. I work for the General Counsel's Office of the FBI. I graduated from BC in 1989 and then went to Suffolk Law School directly from BC. I clerked for a federal district court judge for a year, and then I worked in a law firm for a couple of years in Boston. Kind of was discouraged with that and looked for alternative career paths and came across the FBI, who at the time was seeking to fill their entire general counsel's office. They had originally been full of agent attorneys, and they decided they wanted to replace the agent attorneys with non-agent attorneys. So I was lucky to fall into that time period where they were hiring over 100 lawyers at one time. And I've been there ever since. So I've been at the FBI for 28 years working as an assistant general counsel.
So I can go next. Yeah, hi, everyone. My name's Katie Vigers. I graduated from Boston College in 2008, majored in communications. I worked for a while after that, about 6 years, and then went back to law school again at BC. Since graduating from BC, I clerked for a trial court judge in Philadelphia for a year, and then I clerked in an appellate court here in upstate New York. After that, I worked for a few years as an environmental attorney and was at a mid-sized regional firm. And then recently made a transition to something a little less time consuming, and have been at the town attorney's office of the town of Colony ever since. So it's a nice kind of mix because I still get to do some of the environmental work that I was doing, and then all sorts of other interesting things. And I've been there for about 6 months.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blair Christian. I'm a corporate transactional attorney based in New York City. I graduated from BC in 2015. After my time at BC, I actually worked for 2 years. I did not know I wanted to be a lawyer while at BC or even shortly thereafter. So I worked in marketing and business development and used that time to study for the LSAT, which I know is coming up a little bit later, how we prepared for law school. So I'll save that long story for the appropriate time. But eventually I went to law school at Fordham in New York, and now I'm at Mayer Brown, where I focus on mergers and acquisitions.
Thank you all for those introductions. Before I jump into the questions I have prepared for the panel, basically we're going to talk about your time at Boston College, shortly post-graduation and like pre-law school, your time during law school, navigating a legal career, and things like that. So just so students are aware. So I guess my first question after the introductions are, in what ways did Boston College, as an undergrad institution or as a law school for who that applies to, how did that specifically help you for either law school or for the legal industry in general? Think about anything specific that you experienced during your time.
So I would have to echo that I also did not know what I wanted to do after BC, and I was a psych major at BC. Utilize that time to sort of explore my interests in different courses. I was also a women's studies minor. So I was doing a lot of reading and writing, which lends itself to law school and the legal field. But I did not, I went directly to law school, but mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so it was sort of like, well, I don't want to work in the psychology field, and I don't know what I want to do. So I'm just going to keep going to school. So I didn't have this career path in mind. But actually, my son is a senior at Wake Forest right now, and he's struggling with, what do I do now? And should I go to law school? Should I wait? Should I not go? And so, I think that everyone sort of goes through that process is, what's my next step? But I don't know that I can say one thing at BC helped me or didn't help me. Of course, just the broad range of offerings that they have in their courses and their extracurricular activities will help you figure out what is the correct path for you.
I would definitely second that. I think kind of speaking specifically to my undergrad work, it gives you, I took classes and, I was a communications major, but I took classes in all sorts of areas. And again, like I also took a lot of classes that were reading and writing heavy. So a lot of focus on that, but it really just kind of gave me a breadth and a really broad background to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I had some idea that I might want to be a lawyer, but that certainly wasn't what I was going to do. Like I said, I worked for 6 years after undergrad before starting law school. And so just kind of, having the ability at BC to take a bunch of different classes and kind of explore what was out there and, hear different ways of thinking and kind of be open to all sorts of disciplines. I think that was really, really helpful. And then in terms of the law school is pretty different than the undergrad, just I think because it is so small. But the kind of the community aspect, the professors at the law school are really wonderful. They're really open to kind of always being there for you and and helping you out and helping you kind of talk through whatever tough issues, legal issues that you're grappling with, or, they're always available to kind of help you supplement what they're teaching in class. And so they were really, really, really incredible. And I can't say enough nice things about them.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo everything that was said. As mentioned, I was a communications major. I also minored in marketing through CSOM. So, and even deciding on that major and that minor, I really had no clue initially starting at BC. I actually came to BC wanting to be pre-med, as a lot of students do, and very quickly had a change of heart after taking a few science courses. So I think, after trying to figure out what I like and trying out different courses, just, BC gives you a wide range of opportunities. So I definitely took advantage of that. Communications and media and entertainment, that was an area I was always interested in. I was always interested in the arts as well, and specifically fashion design, which BC did not at the time. I don't know what the course catalog looks like now, but did not have anything in that space. So the closest thing I took to it was costume design, which I remember very well. So, just taking very, very different courses like that and just figuring out what I liked. You learn transferable skills within those classes anyway. So, I didn't really put pressure on myself in terms of what I wanted to do once I realized pre-med was not it for me. I just took advantage of what was offered, by way of the different courses. And I think that that's pretty much what helped me consider even going to law school and, think of my career options.
Yeah. So the one other thing I would add is I also spent the summers exploring different career paths. So one summer I worked for an advertising agency in Boston, and one summer I worked for an engineering firm. So, that's also another way to figure out your path forward is, even being a paralegal at a law firm or, trying to volunteer somewhere is helpful in figuring out what approach you want to take once post-grad.
Just waiting to see if anyone else has more to add. But if not, thank you all for those illuminating responses. I love how you all equally encourage students to explore all the opportunities that are at their fingertips, and especially what Blair said, kind of to echo all of the transferable skills you'll gain from really anything that you can do at BC, as long as you are keeping an open mind. I think that's really important. So I appreciate that. Kind of moving on, thinking about your time during law school as a law student, what, if you can think of, made the greatest impact on you during your time in law school? Any professors I know that was mentioned, or clinic opportunities or specific internships, and what that impact was on you and how it's affected you today?
So I went to Suffolk Law, and I absolutely loved Suffolk. They had so many opportunities available to the students, and the faculty were amazing. Some of the things that I did when I was there is I did a couple clinicals. I worked for the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. I worked for a pro bono place in Jamaica Plain, helping people get divorced, actually, low-income people get divorced. And that was my first experience working with one-on-one with clients. And it was really amazing as a second-year law student to be able to see how you can work in the court system and help somebody get, end a marriage or, get to a better place in their life. And it was very empowering. And there was so much gratitude I didn't feel like I was doing much at all. You just fill out it was actually quite simple. You fill out a few forms, file it with the court, but just the changes that you can make for people and even empowering those people. And then working for the district attorney's office, you get to learn the criminal side of things. And if you're interested in that. So again, sort of like what we said about BC is just dabbling and seeing what's out there. You never know what you're going to love. You might go to law school thinking I want to be a prosecutor and then decide that you really don't like criminal law. And so that you just get out there and force yourself to try different things.
Yeah. And again, kind of on that note, I didn't go to law school knowing what kind of law I wanted to practice. I knew I had a general interest in, government and regulatory work and things like that. And I kind of found my way to environmental law through that. But, you know, I certainly had a lot of experiences. You know, one summer I worked at Greater Boston Legal Services representing victims of domestic violence on immigration petitions. The following summer, I interned at a law firm where doing all sorts of corporate transactional work. I quickly realized that that certainly wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't the best fit. So again, I think just kind of making sure that you're taking advantage of the opportunities, you know, wherever you wind up at law school, of the opportunities that are there for you to kind of explore and figure out what you like and what you don't like. Because I don't know that there's anyone that I know or that I went to law school with that entered law school and said, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, 5 or 6 years later are still doing that exact thing that they thought they wanted to do and we're going to, you know, love doing and do forever.
I would say in terms of a law school experience, I mean, the greatest impact, I would say all of my internships, I think interning is very important. And, you know, it's just another way of testing out the field before actually committing to a long-term role. You know, there are, of course, other opportunities, just like a BC in law school, there's many ways that you could explore your interests. There's journals, there's competition teams like trial advocacy, moot court, there's negotiation teams, there's various different things. And all of those do provide fulfilling experiences. And I personally think interning made the greatest impact for me in my law school experience. I knew I had interest in many different areas of law. As mentioned, I was interested in media and entertainment and fashion. And that was actually one driving force as to why I went to Fordham. Fordham has a fashion law institute. The institute connects you with, you know, various fashion companies that are based in the New York City area. So while at Fordham, I actually, I volunteered with the institute, and we would host pop-up clinics with aspiring designers and help them with any legal issues. The institute also hosts many events, and I would help them throw these events, and, you know, it provided great networking opportunities, which helped me land an internship at Louis Vuitton and another LVMH company called Fresh. I also interned with the Irish government, so I studied abroad for one summer. And worked on intellectual property policy work. And, you know, so that all of those experiences helped me tap into that creative side of law, I guess. However, you know, as I mentioned, I had many different areas of interest. So I also had a corporate background. I used to work at a consulting firm prior to going to law school. So I'd always had this interest in corporate transactional work. And I did get to see some of that in my internship experiences as well. And that, I think, you know, just having that different internship experience helped shape what kind of career I wanted. I did have in-house experience, government experience, and, you know, more institutional experience, volunteering at my law school. And from that, I realized I wanted to work in a law firm. At least for now. I hope no my firm is on the call today. But no, my firm is great. I just, you know, law firms can be very hectic, but, you know, from those internship experiences, I was able to decide for myself that I do like the diversity of work that you're offered in a law firm versus working in-house or a government agency. So that's why I cannot emphasize enough how important interning is.
I will also, because Blair mentioned journals and, you know, trial advocacy teams, moot court teams. I was the editor-in-chief of the Environmental Affairs Law Review at BC when they still had that. And that was honestly one of the most impactful things that I did, having the opportunity to really focus on my writing and improve my writing and make sure that I, you know, was being really clear and, you know, just being able to do that it was an awesome opportunity. And it also has been really helpful in my career because, you know, the ability to write clearly and succinctly and do that quickly is really an important skill for a lawyer. And so that really has been, you know, that when I think about law school, that's definitely one of the number one, you know, experiences that I look back on and feel really grateful to have had.
Okay, if no one has anything else to add, thank you for those responses. I think, again, articulating really great advice to students. With that, my next question is, what advice would you want to tell pre-law students at Boston College about the application process to law school or the decision to go to law school? I think we've touched on that a little bit, so focusing maybe more on how you prepare for the LSAT, how you prepared to apply, like how you came to that decision to apply. I know a lot of students on the call are maybe even getting ready to apply themselves. So what you would tell them about that?
So I don't know that I have much helpful information because I applied to law school 30 years ago. So I don't know how timely it is. And I've heard that they're actually, some schools are no longer requiring the LSATs. So things are changing. But it's, you know, I looked around at a lot of different law schools, and at one point was thinking about going to the West Coast and ended up being very local and staying here at Suffolk, which I'm thrilled that I did. And in retrospect, it helped me a lot. But you know, again, it's just like keeping an open mind as to where you go and what you want to do. Some law schools are very focused on specific areas of the law, and of course that can pigeonhole you and can work against you to a certain degree. But you know, think outside the box as to where you want to go. Don't make the decision to, you know, you want to stay local, look around, see what's out there, because there's a lot of opportunity outside of the New England area.
So yeah, when I was applying for law school, this was back in 2013, 2014, I had been working in a job that I really, really, really did not like. And I was fortunate enough to be able to actually just quit my job, take 9 months off. The first kind of chunk of that was really focused on studying for the LSAT, taking the LSAT. So I got an LSAT book and I would just go sit in a Starbucks in the North End where I was living at the time, every day, and just like do practice questions and time myself and just, you know, do the LSATs over and over and over and practice LSATs just over and over and over and over and over and over again. In hindsight, I think I wish I had taken a class. I think it would have been probably a better use of my time. But that's not to say that you necessarily need to. And then when you're actually applying, I think one thing that does make a difference for certain schools, not all schools, but really demonstrating a specific interest in that school. And so where they have like a school specific essay or a school specific questionnaire, I mean, make sure, a lot of times those are optional, but I would say it does make a difference, and schools really do want to see that you're not just applying to, you know, the top 25 law schools. They want to see that you've kind of understood, you know, what they're offering, demonstrated why you want to go there. And, you know, so if they do have those optional questions, I would recommend that you know, kind of fill those out. And then I also will just say, I think law school can be really expensive. Obviously, tuition is really expensive. And if you put the time in to apply and to get a really, you know, a good LSAT score, or really put together a very solid application, in my experience, law schools are very generous. They're pretty competitive for students. I mean, or at least they were, you know, 10 years ago. And they'll give you, you know, half off tuition or, you know, no tuition, whatever it is. I mean, and so that's not necessarily need-based. It's all primarily merit-based. There is certainly need-based aid, but the merit-based aid is really where schools can be generous and where you have some ability to control that and control sort of the amount of debt that you're taking on.
Yeah, to piggyback on that point, I would say if you're thinking about law school, definitely think long and hard about it. It is a huge commitment, not just in terms of time, but also money, as Caitlin just mentioned. It's a huge burden. But not to overwhelm you now. I mean, there's plenty of scholarship opportunities, as just mentioned, and I would just do your research on that too. Like, as you're considering LSAT preparation options, you also want to think about how you're going to finance your law school education, because it is quite expensive. But I would also do research on different LSAT companies. I think I did, I self-studied for a little bit using PowerScore. And then I think I also took courses through Kaplan. As mentioned, I kind of realized I wanted to go to law school after I graduated from BC. So my first job after BC, I was working at a property management company in their financial management department. It was just not exciting for me. But thankfully, it was not a demanding job. So I would study really early in the morning, maybe during lunch breaks and after. It wasn't a job that required me to work, 60 to 80-hour weeks or anything ridiculous like that. So I just took advantage of that time and did what I could, but, and studied. But eventually it was just not a challenging job for me. So after I took the LSAT, I eventually applied to a different job at a consulting firm. And at that point, I think I was still studying to take the LSAT. I wasn't that satisfied with my score. So I think that's when I picked up Kaplan courses and, just came up with a new study routine. Like 5 a.m., I would do a portion of the course and, after work, get right back to it again. But, if you're fortunate enough, or, if you're living with your parents and don't have to worry about a job or anything, like definitely, proceed with that. Just that you're very fortunate to do that. I would say, just consider your options in terms of financing, and also there's so many different resources out there. So just take your time, because it is a commitment. So you want to make sure you're going into the process well equipped.
From a financial aspect of it, I'll just give a little plug to the government agencies that you do get tuition reimbursement if you work for the government after law school.
Yes, thank you for that, Kathleen. I'll also plug the Career Center if you need any resources for your law school search, personal statement review, assistance with getting letters of recommendation. We can talk about LSAT prep. We offer all of those services and more at the Career Center. So again, thank you all for those answers. I feel like I've said this a million times, but like advice that I could never even think of. Super helpful, I think, for students, especially the LSAT, I think is like the next step for a lot of students, because it's the first step almost kind of getting started to study. So very great. Now we're kind of shifting into graduating law school, entering in your first job as an attorney or whatever you were doing after graduating law school. I'm curious to know if you could all speak to what the job search process was like coming out of law school, and maybe how the legal industry is unique in that process.
So, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Kathleen.
So I was just going to say, one of the things that helped me greatly in getting a position right after law school was that I was on law review. It's really important to sort of differentiate yourself from other students in law school, especially if you go to school in New England, because there are so many law schools here and very competitive law schools. So you need to do things while you're in law school that are going to set you apart from other people looking for jobs. And so law review or other journals is a great way to do that. And then I decided to go to clerk, which is another way to sort of get yourself out there and make yourself more competitive. Is you apply for a clerkship in your second year of law school. I applied for both federal and state. I ended up clerking for a federal judge in Massachusetts for a year, which landed me in a law firm after that. So that was my path. I ended up in a law firm and I was very unhappy and was thinking of leaving the legal field altogether because I was just so disillusioned with law firm life. But then I realized that with a law degree, there's so many opportunities. At first, I was just very narrow thinking about law firm is the way you go forward after you get your law degree. But there's so many options. I mean, you can work for a town council, or you could be in the government agency or state, federal, local. You could work for a lobbying firm or think tank. There's just numerous opportunities out there. And when I moved to Washington, I was exposed to so many different opportunities that I didn't ever even think existed. So again, when you get to law school, there's also a career center that will help you along the way. There's lots of firms that come to your law school and try to recruit you. And there'll be people who will mentor you through the whole law school process and how to find a job once you graduate.
Yeah, and so I just will say one thing that I think that was really surprising to me about the job search is how early it starts. So you're not allowed to basically do anything your first semester of law school in terms of looking for a job. But, December, I think it's December 1st, you're able to start applying for internships for your 1L summer. And then during that 1L summer, you basically start applying for internships and jobs for your 2L summer. And then that normally leads to employment after graduation. So for me, I was very surprised at how early it kind of starts. And for someone who didn't necessarily know what kind of law they wanted to practice and just was sort of open to kind of whatever came along, it was kind of hard because I wanted to keep just getting different experiences and, taking advantage of some of the internship opportunities and things like that, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So when ultimately graduation kind of was coming around, I had worked at a firm my 2L summer, and it just really wasn't a good fit for me. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And so, I basically told them that I was not going to be coming back after graduation, and, was fortunate enough to have some professors who I had kind of talked to this about and just been I don't know what I want to do. And they put me in touch with a judge at a trial court in Philadelphia who was awesome. And it wound up being a really great job and just kind of a really great year to see all sorts of different things that kind of come before the court and just figure out, get a better sense of what I did want to do. At the beginning of that year, I did have an opportunity to, apply for a clerkship for the following year at an appellate court. And at that point, I did really like clerking, and I had some sense that I did want to move back to upstate New York where I grew up, and the appellate court happened to be there. And so it made sense for a lot of reasons. But again, it was nice. An appellate court is very different than a trial court. But again, you kind of see the same, you see a similar really wide range of different matters. And it does kind of give you a sense of, how different things come about, what you might want to do, what you like doing, what you really don't like doing. And so that's kind of how that came about. And then when I was done clerking, I just really took my time and tried to find a firm that, was going to be a good fit. And I think I will echo what everyone here has said, is that law firm life is very tough. It can be brutal. It's really time consuming. I was fortunate that I had an awesome mentor, and I really liked the firm that I was at. Ultimately, the time commitment really just became too difficult to manage. But, I'm grateful that I had that experience, and grateful that I really did take the time to find a firm that was going to be a good fit, notwithstanding kind of some things that are inherent to law firm life.
So with respect to the job search, as mentioned, I think it's really drilled into you in law school. I don't know why. I think it's ridiculous to pursue a career in law firms. And there's just so many different ways you could take your legal career. I know so many people who don't even practice law, but went to law school. So there's just so many different things you could do once you have your JD. But I drank the Kool-Aid and I went to a law firm. So with respect to my process, I didn't actually go through the traditional process in terms of getting a summer associate gig my second summer and then joining at that firm the following year post-grad. My first summer, I interned at a small or mid-sized law firm in New York and split my summer there, and then studied abroad in Ireland, where I took intellectual property courses, and also interned at the government agency. And then I interned throughout the year. My second year, I was a research assistant at the National Law Institute, and I interned at Fresh, which is a LVMH skincare company. And that opportunity actually pretty much put my foot in the door at Louis Vuitton, and then I interned there my second summer. So I didn't really have the traditional go to a law firm for your second year and then, join after. Just having those experiences. At that point, I had 4 different work experiences. So I was at the government agency, in-house, and at a small law firm. And, just having that spectrum experience, I really just took to the law firm experience the most. I liked having diversity of work. No day was the same. I liked having different clients. So every day was pretty much different, and I compared to my other experiences. So at that point, it's my second year, and I'm like, all right, what am I doing? I knew I had a little bit more of a focus. I knew I wanted to go to I knew I wanted to work at a law firm post grad. I'm like, okay, great. What do I want to do at this law firm? I don't want to be a litigator. I don't want to stand up in court. That's just never been my thing. I took a lot of drafting courses in law school, and I knew I just wanted to be in the transactional side of things. So as a result of that, just, taking advantage of different opportunities in front of me to help figure out my interests, that helped streamline my search for post-grad opportunities. I looked at different firms who either had strong corporate transactional practices or intellectual property, because I had, these 2 very different interests. And eventually I stumbled across my firm, which Mayor Brown, which I really liked the firm just because the firm gives you an opportunity to dabble in different areas within corporate transactional work. So my first years, I worked on mergers and acquisitions, fund formation, fund management. I didn't know what any of this stuff was in undergrad. So if any of this just sounds unfamiliar, I'll try to I guess make it less legalese. And then capital markets, which is basically, things that you'll hear about, IPOs or working with the SEC and stuff like that. So I dabbled in all of those areas, and now I work as an M&A associate at my firm. But I think, as mentioned, you'll see in law school that there's going to be so many different firms trying to wine and dine you, and that definitely influences a lot of people's career choices. So, but I think ultimately you just have to figure out what is a good fit for you, what and who you work. You're going to be working long hours with your colleagues, so you want to make sure that you mesh really well with your coworkers. And that was also a deciding factor for me when I was looking at firms. I took advantage of all the different networking opportunities just to see, the, I guess, personalities of the firm. And you really can get a gist of what your work life would be like at these companies by taking advantage of those networking receptions and speaking events and whatnot. So I just found ultimately that, my firm was a good fit. The people were very genuine, and, I've had a really great positive experience thus far. So yeah, I think, I don't want to repeat all of what's been said, but, there's plenty of resources out there. My career services at Fordham, they helped me tremendously. I would go into the office all the time. At that point, when I knew what I wanted to do, I would go there and get my resume critiqued, set up mock interviews, just tell them what I was interested in, and they would connect me with different alums at different firms, or just maybe not at firms, just so I could just think a little bit more about what I wanted to do and make sure I was making a sound decision. So definitely just, utilize your career center, and take advantage of more opportunities.
Okay, if there's nothing else to add from any of our panelists, I'd love to turn it now over to the students for the remaining 20 minutes of our panel. Please feel free to turn your camera on, unmute. If you have something, don't feel like you have to raise your hand or anything, just hop in.
Hi, I'm Hannah. Thank you so much for your time. I had a quick question about for folks who want to take a bit of space in between the time before going to law school, and if the specific area or position you have before going into law school is considered heavily in the application process, or if it doesn't really matter exactly what you're doing, just the application in itself showing interest to that school, or if they maybe took into account whether you were a paralegal or the application of that specific position you held prior to going into law school.
So I certainly had a number of friends who worked as paralegals before going to law school. So before I went to law school, I worked first on a federal grant that studied basically how crime impacts victims of violence, their families, their communities. I basically administered the grant, made sure that we were, kind of adhering to what we had said we were going to do with our funding, and just kind of doing general admin work. When the grant funding ran out, I took a job in fundraising. So, I mean, in my first job, it was sort of like legal adjacent, but not really at all. And my second job had nothing to do with the law. And so I think it's helpful generally to have work experience, because you know how to be in an office, you know how to have a boss, it's just, working in a 9-to-5 job is so different than probably any other job you've had. And so it's just helpful to have work experience and kind of know what you're looking for in a job, know just kind of the lay of the land. But I think having some legal experience on your resume is probably helpful. I don't think it's imperative. I don't think it hurts at all. I think the important part is, that you have a story to tell about why you want to go to law school or why you want to go to this specific law school. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, well, I did this to show my interest. You just have to be able to kind of frame it up in a way, that in a genuine way that kind of tells your story and what you're looking to do.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gracie. I kind of have a follow-up question to the last question, which is, so if you're planning on like taking a gap year to like study for the LSAT or whatever before law school, what I guess, like, in your opinion, is it important to continue to like work in the professional industry? Like, is it, I guess a better way to ask it is, like, do law schools like look down upon just like hunkering down and doing nothing but studying for the LSAT for 1 year?
I mean, I don't know that it necessarily matters. Again, I think it's just about the story that you can tell kind of in your admissions packet about why you did what you did. I mean, like I said, I took 9 months off between when I quit my job and when I started law school. And in that time, I coached a synchronized swimming team and like did whatever I wanted and went to Soul Cycle every day. And it was the best 9 months of my life. Like, it was awesome. So if you have the opportunity, a year is a really short period of time. So if you have the opportunity to take time and, kind of do whatever you want, there's not a lot of opportunities, not a lot of times in your life that it makes sense to do that, or that you have the ability to do that. And so I think, I would say take advantage of it, because, it's rare to have that opportunity, and you're really lucky to kind of be able to just focus in that way.
Yeah, I would just echo that. And in terms of, you really want to make sure that your story is clear and apparent to the people reading your application. They read so many applications every day. So to the extent that you have something distinguishable about you, that is what's going to go a long way. And, they'll remember that, that needs to be conveyed in your personal statement and supplemental materials and whatnot. So I would just think about that. You don't want to just study and do nothing else. You want to just think about, exploring your interests. And as Kate said, if that's SoulCycle or whatever the case may be, then, definitely take advantage of that and just show that through your materials. It definitely makes a huge difference. I remember speaking to Fordham's admissions team a lot. I would help, prospective students, and, they would say, oh, this student, the one who wrote about this, or, this person who taught English in Korea, these are the things that admissions counselors take away when they're reading your application. So you just want to think about how you're going to utilize that time in addition to studying.
So I did not take a time off between undergrad and law school, and I actually regret that. And I am now, as I said, talking to my son who's graduating from Wake about what he wants to do. And he asked me this, what should I do? Should I take time off? Should I go right away? And I encourage him to take time off, and I encourage him to do something that's meaningful to him, because this is the time in your life that you can do that. And there's no need to rush to law school. Law school will be there. But, a good story about what you did during that year is going to be helpful to you. Just, don't go and work in a law firm or do something that's legal just to get into law school. Use that time wisely. It's precious time.
Thank you.
I have a question from a chat. Salvatore is having trouble with the microphone on their computer. They ask if you could talk about what your day-to-day work life entails. If you could reiterate your role before you begin, that would be great. But thinking about what day-to-day you do and maybe how it's unique to your specific legal industry.
So I am an assistant general counsel for the FBI, and I specialize in employment discrimination law. So I'm a litigator. I defend the FBI in employment discrimination cases that are brought by their employees or applicants. And so my day is different every single day. Some days I'm in court, some days I'm in deposition, some days I'm just at my computer writing a brief. And my cases are very varied. So sometimes I'll be working on a case where somebody applied to be an agent for the FBI and was denied that position because of a medical reason. And they've brought a case of disability discrimination for that. And so I'll be working on that. Or I'll have a case where, say, a middle-aged white man didn't get a promotion and a Black female got that promotion. And so he's suing the FBI for race discrimination. So my cases are very varied, and within the General Counsel's Office of the FBI, there are counterterrorism cases, counterintelligence cases, national security cases, and also a bunch of different civil litigation matters, because if the FBI goes and breaks down somebody's door and it was the wrong door, then we get sued for breaking down that door. So then we have attorneys that work on those cases. And I have the opportunity to move from employment discrimination to other areas if I want. I've stayed with employment discrimination. I find it a fascinating, diverse area of the law. For me, it works because I like the difference. Every day is different where I could be, and my cases are nationwide, so I can be flying all over the country for a different deposition or in a different court. So I enjoy it. It's, the days are long and the work is hard, but it's very gratifying for me.
So I work in the town attorney's office at the town of Colony, which is it's a large town in upstate New York, right outside of Albany. And before that, I was an environmental attorney. I did that for 3 years, so I can probably kind of give you a better sense of what the day-to-day is with that. And when I was an environmental attorney, it could be something different every day, but primarily what I was focusing on was representing clients who had violated all sorts of different environmental laws. So they have a permit to discharge a certain amount of pollutant into a water body, and they, put too much in. And so talking to regulators a lot and basically explaining, either why my client did what they did or why what they did isn't really that big of a deal, and, negotiating down penalties and things like that. I also did a fair amount of land use and zoning work. So represented a lot of infrastructure clients, solar developers, energy transmission companies, cell towers to get their permits to, build whatever they were going to build. And so that involved a lot of travel, kind of going all around the Northeast to various municipalities and presenting and answering questions and, and just kind of like being a face for my client. And then I think now in the town attorney's office, like I said, I haven't been there that long, but I mean, thus far, it's something new every day. Every day is very crazy. My phone basically starts ringing at 8:30 in the morning, and it stops ringing at 4:30 when the town offices close. And it's, different departments that I represent. They have questions about whatever they're doing. They have questions about contracts that they're entering into. They have questions about disputes that they're having with vendors. They have questions about disputes with residents. We deal with a lot of residents who just for whatever reason don't want to pay their taxes. They don't want to pay for the utility service that they have. So it's just dealing with a lot of people who have all sorts of different ideas about what they're entitled to and what their rights are, and being able to basically, meet those people where they're at and have a conversation with them and kind of explain to them in a nice and polite way, why you do have to pay your taxes and why water is not free. And so it can be, a variety of things. I also manage our litigation portfolio and our insurance claims. So when someone sues the town for who knows what, I work on reporting that to our carriers, making sure that we have insurance. And then I work with our outside counsel and kind of manage what our outside counsel is doing in anticipation of, trying these matters or settling them.
So I'm a corporate transactional attorney. I work at Mayor Brown in the corporate and securities practice, where I focus on mergers and acquisitions. So that primarily entails assisting companies with acquiring or selling companies or entering into strategic relationships with other companies. And in terms of day-to-day, each day is different. I find myself working on up to like 7 different transactions a day. And as an M&A associate, you're kind of like a project manager of each transaction. So you are looking at the overall deal structure, right? Like, how is a deal going to be structured? Are we focused on assets or stock ownership? Just thinking in terms of big picture. But then there's many different aspects to a transaction where, because you're, purchasing or selling a company, that entails so many different things: employment, tax, intellectual property, environmental, and all these different areas of law. So what I find myself doing very often is coordinating with other lawyers in that space and seeing how they, what risks in their area of law are impacted with this transaction. And depending on what we're doing in the deal, if we're selling or buying, then, as an associate, I'd be in charge of creating a diligence memo where, we would review the target company's materials that they make available to us via a data room. And we, assess pretty much the risk of the transaction for our client and put that in a memo. Whereas if we were helping our clients sell their company, then we would be involved with in that auction process and helping them get all the materials that they need to demonstrate that for potential acquirers. And then, so that's kind of on the diligence front. And then there's drafting, of course. So, you're drafting a transaction agreements, and there'll be many, many ancillary agreements, NDAs, transition services agreements, and, employment agreements, which we would coordinate with our specialists on. So I mean, in terms of today, I had many meetings negotiating NDAs, assisting a client sell their business. So that's just a snapshot, but generally each day is very different.
And I do think, you know, everybody has said that every day is very different. That's one of the nice things about being a lawyer, is that really you just don't know, you know, you can have a plan for your day, but it's something is going to walk in the door that you didn't plan for, and you have to pivot and, you know, be quick on your feet and kind of figure out how to deal with that. And so that's what makes, you know, being a lawyer fun.
Hi, my name is Asal. I just had a quick follow-up to that question. And again, thank you for your time. What is your like work to life balance, like discussing all these like day-to-day operations, especially in like corporate law? So a little bit directed towards Blair.
It's pretty tricky. I was laughing when Caitlin said that her emails stop at 4 p.m. because my emails don't stop. And I probably got 20 since we've been on this call. But yeah, no, it's very busy. But part of the reason why, you know, email traffic is nonstop is because my firm has global office. So right now I'm working on a deal with our colleagues in the UK. So, you know, there are different time zones, or I work on a lot of deals where clients are based in India. So that really impacts work-life balance because we're a global firm. So we're working with so many different people. So that definitely affects things. But, you know, I'm sure you've heard many horror stories from, you know, people have worked at different law firms. And honestly, I can't relate. I've had a really good experience at my firm. Work-life balance is really hard, especially in the corporate transactional side, just because there's ebbs and flows to the practice. You can't really plan ahead on a lot of things. Whereas like if you're a litigator, you pretty much have, or I'm speaking generally, I've never been a litigator, but you know, my co-panelists can chime in here, but you, for the most part, have a sense of deadlines for when you're submitting briefs and memos and different materials to the courts. Whereas transactional side of things, that's not really the case. Your clients want to get the transaction done as soon as possible. So as a result of that, you know, you may find yourself working over the weekend. I will say that, you know, I do work over the last weekend. I worked the whole weekend, but that's not very common. I do have weekends to myself. I do go on vacation. I am able to, you know, have a little bit of work-life balance. But again, it's just not as flexible, especially, you know, as my co-panelists, because of this demanding nature of the job. So it's definitely very tricky. I don't know. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
And I will say, because I did just recently leave my firm to get a little bit better work-life balance, it is really hard. My firm, one of the things that we did was, you know, one of the things they emphasized was being really client focused. So like Blair mentioned, when a client calls you, you know, you need to drop whatever you're doing and work on meeting their need as soon as possible. That can be really hard. And I did a really bad job of setting boundaries between work and life. That was part of that was made harder by COVID, because that once you're home now, it's just work all the time. But I personally was horrible at setting those boundaries. If you are interested in that kind of law, or you are interested in working at a firm, my biggest recommendation would be to be really strict with yourself. Obviously, you want to make a good impression, and you want to be accessible to the partners, and you want to be, you know, doing your work and meeting expectations and doing what needs to get done, but you have to really police your own boundaries. And I really did a bad job of that and got myself into a pickle with my firm. But, you know, like I said, I did enjoy my experience at my firm. I still talk to, you know, my mentor all the time. She was our practice group leader. I do think about going back, and you know, part of that conversation is understanding the kind of boundaries that I would have to set and like really do a diligent job of policing.
Yeah, I think remote life has made, you know, the work and the non-work life blend so much that it's hard to distinguish. Pre-COVID, I was in the office constantly, and then post-COVID, because the government was anti-remote work, and then they were forced to accept remote work. And now I'm home 3 days a week, and it's like I feel like I'm working 24/7 sometimes. But a lot of that is with litigation, there are deadlines, but you have to meet those deadlines. And so I worked all last weekend too, because I had a brief due on Monday. So, while you can control some of it, you just, being a lawyer is a lot of work.
Thank you. That did help a lot. Thank you.
I know we're running short on time, but I just have one more quick question. Regarding sort of the boundaries you set and the autonomy you have over your work, on the sort of moral front, do you have the ability to sort of choose which clients you take on, or if something aligns more fully with your values, or is it sort of just a you get who you get kind of situation?
I mean, in my experience, it is really a you get what you get kind of situation. I think probably that changes once you're more senior and you are at sort of a partner level. Because again, they're your clients, but as an associate, certainly I think you're just kind of taking whatever walks in the door. With that said, I think even clients that you are aligned with, one thing that I found in working with clients is that they have their own agenda, and you can be giving them the best advice in the world, and they are just on their own program. And, so even when you're kind of aligned values wise, you may not be aligned goals wise or strategy wise. And ultimately you have to kind of find a way to work with your client and help them sort of understand what's, the least risky thing to do, or how do they minimize risk within their own risk tolerance, or whatever it is you're advising them on. So that I think can be really challenging about having clients, is just that you're often not seeing eye to eye. You're not often focused on the same things. So it's just a part of client services that's tough.
Thank you.
So one of the great benefits of working for the FBI is that in my position, if I do come across what I find to be true discrimination or harassment, I have the opportunity to resolve that in favor of the victim. So I don't have to defend a case that I feel something happened that was improper, and I can settle with that client. I can make changes in the agency itself. So I feel something I didn't feel in my law firm is I feel empowered in a government agency.
Awesome. Thank you.
We are at 7 p.m. Unless anyone has any really pressing questions they want to ask, or if you want to, you can send those to myself or Cameron and we can connect you. But I know everyone's, probably got things to do, so I will wrap up here shortly. Thank you, Caitlin, Blair, and Kathleen so much for taking time out of your clearly very busy schedules. We really, I think I could speak for everybody, we appreciate all the advice that you were able to share. I think we covered so much. So yeah, thank you. I see people are hopping off, but enjoy the rest of your night. And yeah, thank you.